Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of The Daily Prompt. I have to give you a little bit of a heads up that I have tried to do this video a couple times now, and my little cough, it's this little tickle, it's not really bothering me that much, but for some reason, as soon as I start recording and start talking, it can send me into fits of coughing. I'm going to try to make it all the way through. If this is your first time here watching these videos, and you're here because you want to learn how to sell Screenplay, please understand that this is a follow-up to episode number 4. Episode number 4 looks at the whole process from idea to story to screenplay to the sale, and presents that in overview. This is kind of a follow-up to that, and the next about 7 to 10 videos are going to look at one video for sort of each of those phases, and then we'll try to make a little bit of sense of it and show you sort of the full context of everything. Now, there is a reason, however, that this is not episode number 2 and that's episode number 1. So don't just start there and move here and move. Literally everything that we've been doing so far has been sort of building the context and helping you understand sort of the framework through which to look at all this stuff so that it'll make even more sense to you and give you much of the bigger picture. What I have found along the way, if you don't know anything about me, I've been trying to build an independent film studio for about 20 years. I started looking for screenplays in Australia when I couldn't find anything. Expanded the search worldwide over about 18-year period, reviewed nearly 30,000 project submissions, personally read about 7,000 screenplays. And I can tell you that literally fewer than 1 in 1,000 is actually viable. And that's really hard for a person who's searching for production companies who are looking for material to know that it's really this needle in the haystack. And most writers, I've found, it's the number one question that new writers have, which is, how do I sell my screenplay? And what I found along the way is that if you're asking that question, chances are you're not actually ready to sell your screenplay. I don't mean that in any way disrespectfully. It's just that the more you know and the more you learn and the longer you're at this, the more things start to fall into place, and you really, it becomes kind of a no-brainer. But it's my belief, sitting on the other end of the table, looking for material that comes in, or I was, not anymore, but I was, looking for material to come in and understanding how writers are going about it. I wanted to reverse engineer the process, so I really started out by reverse engineering that part of the process. So let's say you're in the screenplay and you want to get it into the hands of a producer who can say yes to that project. The way you do that, how do we make that happen, right? So let's assume that you have a screenplay that's extraordinary, that's on point, that is something that a producer would want and would want right now. How do you find and connect with them? Well, first of all, the first thing you have to do is have that screenplay that is extraordinary, that is on point, that is something that they want to and can say yes to right this minute. If you write a screenplay that is extraordinary, perfect, right up my alley, but you get it to me right after I go into production on a 3-picture deal, right? I can't do anything with that project. It would have been great, but thank you, no, right? So that's not necessarily a rejection of your story or your writing, but it does mean that you're not in sync with that producer. So one of the challenges that I have along the way is that the vast majority of newer or sort of intermediate level writers often think that if I just can get my script into the hands of a producer, any producer, then that's going to get me where I want to go. And that's simply not the case. At the end of the day, you need to find the one producer that's perfect, that's ideal for your project. So how do we get to that person? Let's say you've identified them and you figured out exactly who that is. How do you actually get to them? Well, in the industry, historically, we've had agents and managers because producers and production companies even can't just spend all their time reading through mountains of material. There's legal issues involved. If you're already developing something that's similar to something that comes in, then that person thinks you stole their idea. They're like, nope, 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 don't send me anything, right? The agents, the managers, what they do is they get to know all the players in the industry. They get to know who's looking for what kind of things are trying to get made. And then the agent and the manager basically filters, right? They're gonna know who wants what, and they're gonna go, I have a writer who does this or has this kind of project. I think that's a good fit for that person. They're gonna try to make that connection. But the agent and the manager, they're not going to bombard the producers and production companies with lots of different things that aren't perfect for those people, because they very quickly will become an agency or a management manager that the producer's like, yeah, I don't want to hear any more from you because you're bombarding me with stuff that's not right for us. So agents and managers have to get really good at figuring out who wants what and being that connector. So writers, at least trying to get into Hollywood and that sort of thing, are it behooves them to get an agent or a manager, right? Because that's how that works. Well, why would an agent or manager take you on board? Because they see potential money in you. They see a way to generate their fees. Now, the thing to understand about agents and managers is that they're not going to make money off of you unless they can sell your project. So if they don't think they can sell your project, if your project's not at a high enough caliber, or they can't see any place to sell your project, or they don't think that you in the room you would kind of ruin the deal, they're not going to say yes to you as a writer. So in order to get the agent or the manager in the first place, your work needs to be of an exceptional caliber. It needs to be top shelf. It really does, because you're competing for all those jobs with the very best in the industry. The people who've been at this for years and years and have lots of experience and lots of credits and have writing styles that those people know, and that those people go, yeah, give me that. I know what his writing's like. They'll know nuances, right? So how do you get to that level? Okay, so that's sort of the challenge of what you're facing when it comes to how do you sell your screenplay, at least in the Hollywood sort of realm, right? Now, if you're in a smaller industry, if you're outside of Hollywood, if you're in Sydney, or if you're in Melbourne, or if you're in the UK, or if you're in other countries as well, all around the world, people are making films all around the world. And so in smaller countries, you don't necessarily have that same protective layer, because there aren't that many people writing screenplays in other countries around the world. When I was in Australia, this is back in the early 2000s, there was a film that was like the #1 film at the Aussie box office. I met the producer at one of the conventions, and I was like, how many spec scripts are you getting each week? And he said, 2. And he was looking for projects, as I was at the time. And so, we sort of had this moment of like, nobody's writing stuff. It'd be great if we had people writing stuff that we could actually continue. He was in a position to go on and make whatever he wanted because his film was top at the box office at the time. But he couldn't, nobody was writing stuff and sending stuff to him. So if you're outside of Hollywood, ironically, there's probably a better chance of getting yourself noticed, of getting yourself connected. Where do you find people? Everybody always asks me this. It's not that hard. IMDb Pro is a perfect way to, that's pretty much where all you need at this point. But go and watch movies that you love. Go and read the local industry trade papers or the Hollywood trade papers and see what's in production and see who's making what and what those companies have made before. So you get a sense of what kind of things they would want to make. At the end of the day, there's no point trying to contact a production company that's not interested in making the kind of film that you've written. I'm never going to make a horror film. So there's no point in reaching out to me, or ever has been, with a horror film. Doesn't mean I don't like you, and doesn't mean I can't help you in other ways. If you want to write horror films, that's great, go for it. It's just not what I want to make and what I want to put out there. So there's no point. You understand? So with that same logic, there are people out there trying to make genre films or low-budget exploitation films or highbrow Oscar-worthy type art house films and stuff that are going to win Sundance. Or different producers have different needs and different sensibilities and different styles and different characteristics. And so to connect with them, you need to figure out, firstly, who that person is and how you can go about connecting with them. And if you need to go through an agent or manager, you're going to have to figure out how to get the agent or manager. So how do you do this then? How do you break through this impenetrable door? Well, you have to be able to prove yourself. You have to be able to prove yourself at a professional level, right? So how do you do that? Firstly, by your project. Your script has to be extraordinary. Stretching that out didn't really have the effect that I wanted to, but it does. It needs to be extraordinary. It needs to be top shelf, because it's competing with all the other top shelf projects, right? How can you get to that point? If you submit your project to screenwriting competitions, you can get some validation that way. But always remember, the screenwriting competitions have to pick a winner. So if all the scripts that get submitted are they're still going to have to pick one, right? Just because a screenplay wins a competition does not mean it's actually a viable screenplay to be able to be turned into a film. There are different motives, there are different objectives. A screenwriting competition has a different objective than a producer who's going to say yes or no to a project. This is why so many writers who've won competitions scratch their heads and go, I've won 6 competitions. How come nobody's ever turned my project into a film? Well, that's possibly why, is you're writing in such a way that's going to win a competition, but that can't necessarily get produced. So, not in any way dismissing competitions. I think they're an incredible marketing tool. If you can win script writing competitions, your writing and your writing style is validated. Now, that project may not be the one that can go on to get made. But if you have other projects that can go on to get made, then having won the competitions will help an agent or manager take you serious, may help a production company or a producer take you seriously. Or if you're in some networking environment and you can meet somebody and you can rattle off the 6 competitions that you won and, hey, I've got this other project that might be perfect for you, whatever. Not to say that we want to do that too intrusively, but those are the kinds of things that add credibility. The best credibility you can have is to come into a meeting with an agent or a manager, producer, production company at some point with a project that is ready to go and credits on other projects that have been made, because then you give them something that they can see. You give them something that they can that's not this project, because a lot of people like to go out and make like sizzle reels for this project, but that's you putting your own creative spin on it, and that can be very off-putting to producers or production companies. Like, I got a director that would do this differently, so let's not show him that. It's a challenging thing. But ultimately, let's assume that you have the project, let's assume you have the credentials, let's assume you're in a position to actually go and open those doors. What do you actually do to open those doors? I made another video about that on this channel before, but I'll sort of give you a little bit of the nutshell version of what it is. What you basically do is you have to hook them, you have to draw them in, and then you have to exceed their expectations. That's ultimately the secret to getting your project made. You have to hook them, you have to draw them in, and then you have to exceed their expectations. So there's a three-part process for doing this. First of all, your log line. If you haven't heard of a log line, don't worry, we'll go into it again, but check the other stuff on this channel for how to write a log line. Your log line has to give them a sense of what the story is and what the movie is. They have to be able to see what you're pitching from the log line alone. Don't just give a teaser, don't just give a little tag. Don't leave out the most compelling element of the whole thing. You need to grab their attention. But here's the thing. Every word you write is going to make a promise. They're going to imply a promise. They're going to imagine where your story is going to go. So when you give them the log line and they imagine where the story goes, they go, that could be really interesting. Send me the synopsis, little one-page synopsis. In one page, what's your story? When they read the synopsis, that needs to go, wow, this writer took it to an even better place than I thought it was going to go from that amazing log line. If you can do that, they're going to go, let me see your script. I want to see what you've done with this. Now, don't forget, though, that the synopsis gives them the picture of what the movie's going to be. And if you've clearly and concisely created a synopsis that draws them in and gives them this vision of what your movie's going to be, and then your screenplay itself peters out on that, or fizzles, or is really not the best expression of that story, or you've got character problems, or dialogue problems, or setting problems, or pacing problems, or any of the laundry list of screenwriting problems, then guess what? They're going to go, oh, this person has good ideas, but they can't execute. And at that point, they're going to go, sorry, no thanks. And the reason they're going to say no thanks is because they have to now develop your project. And if they have to develop your project, they might as well develop their own project. We all have ideas too, you know. The reason producers aren't just simply writing their own stories is because there's time and energy and effort involved in developing a project. The benefit of a spec project is that here's a project that's ready to go. That's perfectly in sync with what I'm looking for. I have the resources. I know how to make this happen. I can see the marketing avenue for it. Let's go make this project. If you are submitting something that is not that, then they have to say no, because it's just, there's too much time and effort involved. Now you could say, well, talk to me about it. I will further develop it for you. But it doesn't work like that, because if you've submitted a project that is not really ready, then the other thing that that's telling the producer, production company, agent, manager, whomever, is that you as a writer are probably not capable of getting this project to the point where it is ready. Which means that we're going to have to hire someone else, which means we're going to have to shell out the cash for that top level writer, that top level talent. Right? And you might say, well, sure, we'll go ahead and do that. It's a great idea. Why not take that chance? Because there are tons of great ideas out there. Literally, of all those nearly 30,000 projects I looked at, there's probably a good 10% of them are really good ideas. But just because we can't shoot an idea. We need the blueprint. We need the whole story. We need to know that the story works. It's not just about a blueprint for us to shoot. It's actually about having a story that's going to be, that when we read it on the page, it's extraordinary. And as we read it, we see the movie. And as we see the movie, we know this movie is going to work if we put it together properly. It's entirely possible. We have a great screenplay. We go out and make it. The people making it don't quite nail it. And so the movie ends up kind of sucking. That's possible too. And producers going into it know that's a possibility. And that just adds to the metric. It adds to how far do you go with the project. Because if I could take a decent script and still make something that's not great out of it, I'm committing to making that thing, even though it might be entirely possible that that thing doesn't end up as a viable film, right? You can have a great screenplay, end up with a not terribly viable film. And so you lose all your money. More importantly, you lose all your time, possibly kill the reputations of the people involved. Like there's a lot riding on all this stuff. So when people ask me, how do I sell a screenplay? It's pretty straightforward. You reach out to the people who do that sort of thing. Agents and managers first, because there's almost no producer or production company is ever going to say yes to your unsolicited project. But most agencies are not going to be looking for a project either. So how do you get to know them? You have to continuously submit. You have to not continuously barrage them, but you have to be a continuous workhorse, right? You have to create screenplays. You have to pitch different things. You have to go to networking events, go to film festivals, meet other filmmakers, get to know agents and managers through whatever means you can, right? So that you get to know who they are. But don't do that until you know with certainty that your project is actually viable. Because if it's not actually viable, all you're going to do is kill that potential contact. We're closed submissions at this point, but I used to get literally thousands of people every year submitting stuff to me that the way they go about trying to submit that thing is so obtrusive and so disrespectful of my time and what I've got going on, that I have a list of people, I literally do, that I'm like, I will never work with that person. Now, I'm an open-minded person, so, if people approach me the right way in the future, I'd probably forgive past transgressions, but not everybody will, because life's short. Most producers can only make a certain number of projects probably in their career. What I'm trying to set up through all this is a machine, right? Something that opens it wide up for lots of people, but I'm not going to hands-on produce every film that my film studio would make, right? Most producers have to be very, very cautious and careful with their time. And because of that, there's no time for the people who we know without a doubt are not really ready for what they're trying to reach out and achieve. So when I see new writers go, I have an idea for a movie, and they go get some script formatting software and they blast something out and they start sending it out, I'm like, you're killing your chances. You're possibly making a bad impression on the very people who at some point down the road you could make a good impression on and get a deal with. So that's sort of in broad strokes what needs to happen. You have to have an extraordinary screenplay. You need to have some way of proving that you're worthy of reading your screenplay, which means you have to have an amazing synopsis and an extraordinary logline. Now, a lot of people are like, log lines don't even matter. And they're kind of right. Log lines don't matter. What log lines are is that initial hook. And so if you're not able to initially hook someone in, they're never going to read further. No one's ever going to read your synopsis if your log line's not solid. No one's ever going to read your screenplay if the synopsis is not solid. Why is that? Because the synopsis I can read in about 15 minutes or so. I don't have to invest a lot of time to go, should I look further? If you send me a log line literally in about 10, 15 seconds, I will know I'm not interested in that project. If I might be, there might be something there. Then I'll see the log line. Maybe I'll invest 10, 15 minutes in reading the synopsis. And if I invest that 10 or 15 seconds, almost invariably I go, okay, nope, I was right initially. Not interested in that. That's what happens with most producers and production companies. And that's why most producers and production companies won't even listen to your logline or your synopsis. If you meet them in an elevator, they're going to put their hand up and go, sorry, I can't listen to any pitches. Because 99.9% of them are not viable and certainly not in sync with what they need in that particular moment. So how do you get in sync with them? How do you know that you've created something that's in sync with them? You have to do a lot of research. You have to figure out who's who, what's what, what's where, what people are doing, what they're planning on doing next. If you see the evolution of someone's career, well, they started out making little horror films. Now they've moved. Peter Jackson makes these great little horror films at the beginning and eventually goes on to Lord of the Rings. He's probably not going to want to make a little horror film again, right? So maybe he will. We don't know. I don't know. But if you start to identify who your targets are and you start to identify the trajectory that they're on, you can really determine where you are, where your project is in sync with that. And then only reach out to those people who are actually in sync with that. Now, most of them are going to say no, so you got to go through the agents and the managers, which means you have to win them over. You're not going to win an agent over. You're not going to win an agent over with one project. It's not going to happen. Because they're not going to look at this one project and go, ooh, I could sell that for $1 million because you're a new writer. They're not going to be able to sell it for $1 million. So they're only going to get a small commission. So they need 2, 3 other projects to be able to know this is a writer who can create material consistently. This is a writer who's creating stuff that I can actually go out and sell. And because of that, this is a writer I might want to nurture and create a career with. So now, there's a whole other layer to all of this, which I believe that's sort of the old way of doing things, and that's sort of the broad advice of it all. I think we live in a new era now, and so there's a new way to go about doing it. I believe that we need to make little indie films, little low-budget films, to teach you the nature of writing for production. So if we do that, then you're going to have those skills that you then apply to all your other projects. You're going to have those credits for the films that we've made. And so that's my sort of goal, and what I'm trying to set out to do is to create this additional layer that's going to help you open those doors in the first place. But to get to that, we need to make sure that your skills are solid. We need to make sure that you have the ability not just to write screenplays, but to actually write screenplays that producers can say yes to. And so what we're going to talk about in tomorrow's episode is we're going to talk about this thing that I discovered along the way. The one thing that I didn't know, that I had no idea, it fell into place as I was reverse engineering the whole process. So the idea is called alignment, and it's that whole thing of being in sync. How can you be in sync, know you're in sync, and if you're not in sync, how do you get in sync with your target along the way? Because that has to happen before you ever get to this point of trying to sell your project. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So today's daily prompt, we're going to pull all this back. We're going to give you a little bit of prompt for today. Today's daily prompt is relatively simple. What I want you to do is look around, Figure out who you think would be 3 producers or production companies that would be suitable for the idea that you have at this point. You are not to contact them. Do not contact anybody. Promise me that you won't contact anybody until after we've been through all of it and way more, okay? Because if you contact them too early, you're going to kill the very best chances you might possibly have, right? But what you need to do is you need to identify who would be a possible target for you. If you start to get your mind thinking in that direction, what happens is, as we go through the creative process, you find and develop ideas and turn them into stories. As you begin that part of the process, what happens is your creativity shifts. You're not writing for a producer, but just simply understanding who's your target, what kinds of things have they done along the way, where does it look like they're going. Just simply putting that knowledge in the back of your head, in your creative subconscious. It's going to color and shape the kind of things that you create. You're going to end up starting to create better quality, better caliber material. So that's today's daily prompt. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions about any of this at all, pop them in the comments below. If you're new here and you want to be notified of the episodes as they come along, click the subscribe button, click the little bell next to the subscribe button. That's how you get notified of new episodes when they come out. Thank you everyone for cough remedies, but I have the cough remedies already, so thank you for that. If you want to contact me directly, Instagram or Twitter is where to send me a direct message. We're about to start building the social media side of all this, the Instagram and all that. So check us out over there. Make sure to follow us over there because we have a lot in store for you ahead. Thank you for watching. Thank you for not just nodding, not just saying, this is good information, but actually, when this is over, stopping, not watching what's suggested next, not watching the next thing on your watch list, but actually stopping, thinking about it, processing it, filtering it through your own experience, your own imagination, your own ideas, really taking a moment with it, rewatch the video if you have to, really process this, and then take physical action today. Whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's 1 hour, whether it's 10 hours. It's up to you, and it's entirely based upon what you have the ability to do. But you have to take physical action, or we're not going anywhere. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.